Thokoza sanibonani, Thokoza sanibonani. Mic check, mic check. Please can you let me know if you can all hear me clearly? Please let me know if you can all hear me clearly. Thank you. Thokoza. Thank you, thank you. Can I please get confirmation in the comments that you can all hear me loud and clearly? Please can I have confirmation in the comments that you can all hear me? Please confirm if you can all hear me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for those that are confirming that you can all hear me clearly. We're just going to wait for people to just come in, and we'll start promptly at 4 p.m., which is on my watch 14 minutes away. Oh, 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 oh. Those who are asking, please let me know that you can all see my shared presentation screen. Please let me know that you can see the shared presentation screen. Okay, perfect, perfect. That's great that you can all see the screen. Also, don't stress if you have to leave or if you miss anything. The whole thing is being recorded right now, so I'll post the entire recording of this lecture on YouTube and Facebook. So please do not stress if you have to leave in the middle of the lesson. Yeah, do not worry about that. It'll definitely be posted the entire recording. Um, well, not necessarily co-parenting, but I'm focusing mainly on isbongo and identity. Let me actually type it out what I'll be focusing on. Okay, let me try and make the screen a bit bigger. Hold on. Okay, let me just try make the screen a bit bigger. Yes, you will be given a chance in between to ask questions, but just use the comment section to drop your question and I'll answer them as we go along. Yes, I will be taking questions. Yes, yes. Questions will be taken. Questions will definitely be taken. Can everybody see the screen clearly? Because I'm trying to make it bigger on my side, but I'm unable to. Can everyone see the topics clearly? Yeah, so please just keep commenting if you can't see the screen clearly. If you cannot or if you can, please let me know and give us feedback on your experience, because then we can always just change the platform that we're using at the moment and we can use a different platform which will allow us to integrate the screen a bit better. Okay, good, good. Screen's clear, screen's clear. Screen's clear. That's great. That's great. Screen's clear. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Screen's clear. Topics clear. Cool. Great. Great. I tried to use big writing so that it comes out quite visibly. Not a lot of writing, but more diagrams. You can hear my voice, but the screen is too small. Please try zoom in on your device and make it. I can't zoom in physically anymore on my side. Um, Hold on. Okay, is that a bit better? Hold on, let me try to zoom in some more. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry if the screen isn't clear for those one or two people. But please just drop your feedback in the comments after this, and we shall. I'll just get the team to take care of it and improve your experience for you with that. Okay, so we're gonna start in 6 minutes. On my watch, it says 6 minutes. We'll start there. Okay. Is that better? Oh yeah. You're not gonna be able to see me. Um, just yeah, you're not gonna. You might not be able to see me mainly because Yes, please do get your notebook. Please do get your notebook. We'll start in about 3 minutes time. Just let those that need to come in come in. Oh, so you're gonna be able to hear my voice, but you're not going to be able to see my face. I'll start the interview first with people seeing my face, and then I'll move to across to the slideshow. Will it be available on Podbean? Not sure. I'll have to ask the team, and they'll get back to you on that. Trying my camera to put it on. Okay, 2 more minutes, just 2 more minutes, and we shall all begin with the second class of Umsamo's online education. So just 2 more minutes. We'll start at exactly 4 p.m. Got 2 more minutes on my side. Someone's asking me, can you watch me on a smart TV? Most definitely, you can. Um, so if you have a smart TV, you can log on onto Facebook on your smart TV, and then you can simply, yeah, you can log onto your profile on Facebook on TV, and then you can watch me. Or alternatively, you can, if you have Apple TV, um, then what you can do is you can actually just mirror your iPhone or iPad to the TV. So yes, you can watch me on TV if you have a smart TV. Okay, so we're gonna begin now. So Walani Sanbonani, greetings one and all, young and old, to everybody watching this today, more particularly to people from the Friends of VVO, our entire Facebook group on Umsamo Institute, but also to those who are abroad, our brothers and sisters in Africa, Australia, America, Europe, and Asia. We recognize you and thank you for taking the time to actually join us on this online education. I know, especially those that are in America, the Americas and Asia, the time difference may be a bit of an inconvenience to you, but we will work around this for you. But thank you nonetheless to taking the time to actually waking up or staying up rather until this time. So today I'm going to focus on Ibong, surnames, identity, and history. Because if you remember last week, I focused a lot on family trees nomlando. That's going to be the basis of our education, is looking inwards and then going backwards. And the reason I'm saying that is that the reason I'll be starting with our generation is I don't want us to hold our parents and grandparents and great grandparents to a different standard than that which we're willing to hold ourselves to. So if we're going to keep our parents accountable and our grandparents accountable, let us start with us. And I want us to look at our own behavior, um, so that, and then span it across. And I'm hoping that you guys are sitting with your mothers and grandfathers during this talk. If not, that's fine. Record it. And if they're sitting in the bedroom or somewhere else, call them and just get them to sit down with you, because this is a nice family-orientated kind of education. So I'm going to flip over to our screen, my slide presentation now. You're not going to see my face, but you will hear my voice. Okay, right. So that is the topic for today. And the breakdown of how it's going to go, in that I have assessed the various scenarios that people face in contemporary South Africa, all the way from perfect wedlock all the way to adoption. And scenario A is first generation. So that's Generation Z. Those are typically those under the age of 35. And then scenario B is looking at the mistakes our parents have made. So we make mistakes as young people, but our parents have also made mistakes, and we're just looking at the mistakes according to the generations. So what's important is to look at where the mistakes happen, because where the mistakes happen in your family tree will determine how exactly you can correct it. Okay, so just a quick recap of last week's lecture. We spoke about the 3 parts of man: body, mind, and spirit, and the 2 laws which require full expression as well as balance between body, mind, and spirit. And that at any given point in time, itongo will also want to be represented or expressed emzimbeni wakho. And it is your responsibility to be a great vessel for itongo to come through and fully express themselves in all the facets of your life. I then concluded the lecture on focusing on your prayer book. Sorry, not your prayer book. I misspelled it there. On your book, your dream book, sorry, and how you should separate the two. The front of the book should be your family history and family tree, and the second half, or the back of your book, should be your umpahlo wako, so what you're actually saying is katsupahla, and then the dream that you have that exact same night. Okay, thank you for the questions trickling in. I'll actually handle them either at the very end or whilst we actually going through the presentation, because sometimes the answers will come through, but just later. So to begin, we're going to look at the history of surnames. And we need to understand that Ibongo typically didn't, excuse the incorrect labeling of the lecture at the slide at the top. Ibongo didn't actually exist very, very long time ago. We didn't have surnames, but we had groups of individuals that carried out similar certain functions, certain trades, or crafts rather. You know? So, for example, abantu bakamkhize, ukhiza is to drizzle. And how our surname came about was that emandulo, we used to take our cattle up to the very top of the mountain where it was drizzling. And because it was drizzling there, the grass used to be a bit more greener, a bit more lush. And inkomo zethu bezilusa khona entabeni phezulu, la bekhiza khona. And hence the name is abakamkhize. And they're just like, I know, bayeke laba abakamkhize. You know, that is one of the theories of how the Mkhize surname came about. There may be others I'm not sure of, but that book, The History of the Embo People, kind of is an example of the documentation of the history of surnames and how surnames do come about. Also, that Siyabonga Mkhize is not me. That's another Siyabonga Mkhize. Just a disclaimer before people say I'm stealing someone's work. And the Mkhizes come from an area by KZN, Bothershield, called Embo. Hence the name, hence Istagazel when I was Sembo. I hope that makes sense. Now, the importance behind Isbongo is that apart from Umpahlo, Nabadala, is the rituals that come with that surname. Certain surnames have certain rituals and there are certain customs which must be performed if one is carrying that particular surname. There are certain livestock that one historically has with certain surnames, certain trades and expertise that were linked specifically with that particular surname. So when it comes to ibongo, no, and weddings, damages, and ukulobola kwengane nomuntu wesifazane, there are certain rules and regulations that one needs to be cognizant of. The first one is that there are 3 parts, pretty much, right, to a perfect wedding. We don't recognize a white wedding, so please bear that in mind. I'm not referring to a white wedding. We don't recognize a white wedding or wesintu. Okay. Ilobolo has no set amount. The 11 cows is simply a guideline, and you do not have to follow it. Second of all, right, or when we're actually having the process of marriage, whether it be ilobolo or the wedding, it needs to happen on the right ancestral grounds with the right ancestral elders involved in that particular process, depending on what surname you are supposed to have or what correct surname. I'll elaborate on that further when we actually tuck into the scenarios. And then inhlawulo also as well has no set amount, right? And it can only be paid once from that particular family. I'll explain that further, but you cannot make someone pay inhlawulo twice. But inhlawulo is compulsory, but ilobolo is not. Okay? So in other words, it is compulsory for when as umuntu wesilisa ukuthi uyikhokhe inhlawulo. However, that does not give you the right to change the child's surname. It is only after ilobolo has been accepted by the mother's family can you change the surname. Okay? And on top of that, you cannot you pay inhlawulo and then you request for ilobolo to be paid. There's no the mother's family is under no obligation to accept ilobolo yakho. So your family can come, they can accept inhlawulo, but they say, cha, asifuni ilobolo, we want the child to remain inganya laikai. Okay. And more particularly and most importantly, golden rule of thumb, blood in, blood out. In order for you to change surnames and be introduced to ancestors, you need to actually slaughter an animal. There needs to be blood spilled for abapants. And that too needs to happen in the right ancestral grounds with the right elders involved. But anyway, let's actually tuck into the examples of what we're doing today. Let's tuck into the examples. Okay. So this is our family tree. And today, how I will be looking at it is this is how I plan to tackle today. So I've broken down 4 generations, because last week, if you remember, I told you go back 4 generations. And we're starting with generation A, which is the millennials and the Gen Z. So this includes those are under the age of 35. And I know some people are going to be upset, but this includes 2000s as well. This is the generation A, right? And then baby boomers. So these words on the right are just kind of generational names that have been given to different generations, right? And so we're going to be focusing on our mistakes, right? And then we're going to look at our parents' mistakes over here. Okay. Let's tuck in. So first things first, scenario A1, wedlock, perfect wedlock. What does perfect wedlock look like? Ilobolo has been paid, right? So let's say this is you're young, you're under 35, you meet a beautiful woman, and you guys decide, look, we want to get married and have a child. We want to do it the normal way, okay? So you pay ilobolo properly, whether it be 2 cows, 3 cows, 4 cows, whatever, that's up to you. Again, no set amount. You have ibizo, right? I know some countries, some other African countries don't necessarily have ibizo. Some other cultures do, some other cultures don't. That's not necessarily specific. That's culture specific, I guess. But the one that is important is umcaco. Other cultures will call it a different thing. But basically, umcaco is the final wedding. That is where an animal is slaughtered. So I'm speaking for women. An animal is slaughtered with An animal. Sorry about that. An animal is sorry about that. Okay. An animal is slaughtered with to release you from your father's home. And then another animal is slaughtered to bring you in. Remember what I said, blood in, blood out. Imbelego is the same thing. And when you have imbelego, they slaughter a goat to bring you into the family. Now, because you are leaving one family, you're entering another one. Same thing. Blood must be spilled here on your mother's family so that they can bring you into your husband's family. Blood must then be spilled again. That is perfect wedlock. Your child that you have with that gentleman post-wedlock can only have the surname Udlamini because that is the male's surname. That child's surname can never change. Alright? Regardless of whether or not you guys remarry or you decide you break up and you remarry, which leads me to scenario 2. After we've had perfect wedlock ngokwesintu, we now have individuals that decide that, you know what, akusasebenzi, asizwani, sorry, if a woman is married and she refuses her husband to name a child, okay, I'll answer that question at the end, right? This child over here, okay, you decided that you and your husband want to have a divorce because it's not working out, all right? You've married ngokwesintu kwaphelela. This child cannot change surnames. Even if the man, Udlamini, passes away and the woman, Wakazuma, remarries, sorry, I don't know if you can see that, remarries this man here, Wagamkize. This man here, Wagamkize, cannot say that this child, his stepchild, must take his surname Wagamkize. This child will remain in Ganyaga Dlamini. Ngesikhathi ishade naye izokhishwa emagcekeni kaDlamini and everything will happen khona kwaDlamini. However, this child over here must go back to the Mkhize family and say thank you for raising me as one of your own. So now what's happened with mixed families, a lot of children are raised by stepdad and stepmom or stepdad, but they never go back to say thank you to the step family that raised them. Okay, right, let us continue. In the event, right, Uzuma no Dlamini divorce, but Uzuma was married ngokokuphelela la kaDlamini. And if you've watched my morning show interviews, I've said that to reverse or undo umshado, ayikho indlela. Now, I'm not here to tell people what to do or how to act or judge people. I am simply saying that this is how serious marriage is, you know. And I'm also showing you that should you go left, these are the options. Should you go right, this is what you should do. Okay. Now, please just listen, because guys, just listen to me speaking and wait, remember your questions, because I'm actually answering as I go along. Okay. So now, Umazuma has married Umkhize. Okay. Lengane le that she's going to have over here, right? This child here that she's going to have with Umkhize. Kahle kahle lengane akonyaka Mkhize. This child ayaka Dlamini. Because Uzuma ingane yaka Dlamini, because she's done the full marriage process has taken place. You can't undo it. Does it make sense? So because there was no contingency put in place for divorce, Uzuma usenganyaka Dlamini. Which means the child that she has with the Mkhize man now is still yaka Dlamini. So I'm not saying that this is right. I'm not saying this is wrong. Again, I am simply saying that as an Mkhize man, you should know what you're going into. As an Azuma woman, you should know what you're getting yourself into. As a Dlamini man or this child here, they should also know what they're getting into. I just want everybody to know what they're getting themselves into. That's all I'm doing here. Okay? Now, which brings me to the next part of my Guys, please hold on. I know there's quite a few examples of people talk about partial marriage or incomplete marriage. I'm going to get to it now. Okay. So, so now let's say, in light of what I've just said now, that there's no way to reverse marriage, we need to have a conversation about wedlock and infidelity and children that come from other people and uwaqel. So I'm going to speak about it from a man's perspective and a male's perspective. I'm going to give information from what happens if either party cheats. Okay. So now we have again Uzuma no Dlamini. They married, they had a complete traditional marriage, perfect marriage, but now let's start with uDlamini, right? uDlamini decides to have an affair with a woman from the Mtembus, Umamtembu. That child's surname is going to be Umtembu. And it can only be Dlamini once Abaga Dlamini decides to go to the Mtembus and say, we would like to pay inhlawulo, si lobolingane. Once that has taken place, okay, then with the slaughtering of a goat to release the child and the slaughtering of a goat to bring in the child, okay, then the child can be Dlamini. But if uDlamini passes away and then uMazuma finds out about this child yangaphandle, right, the Mtembus cannot come to the Zumas and say, no, lengane eyaka Dlamini, therefore we have rights to claim to his estate and whatnot. No, that's not the case. Leongane akyonya kwa Dlamini. Only once imfanelo or the procedures have been done can they say that this child has claim over the estate of uDlamini. Now, we're going to the Zuma side. Let's say the mother decides to cheat, right, with Umkhize. This child here is in a very difficult problem. In that this child can only keep, because uma wake wagana ka Dlamini perfectly, uyingane yaka Dlamini, and therefore konke okuzalwa kaMazuma will be waka Dlamini. And this child here is waka Dlamini, not waka Mkhize. And at no point can this child say, no, ngifuna waka Mkhize, ngicela ningikhiphe ningihlawule or what. No. Because you see, this is what I'm saying to us young people. We need to think about the outcomes of the decisions that we take. Okay? And now, your child here, what needs to happen for things to go right for him, kumele ukuthi ihlazo ligezwe. Naye ubaba, if he steps out, you don't know what is he bringing back home, ngoba awazi ukuthi umamthembu unani. Naye kumele ukuthi ageze umuzi as well. The same goes for umama. Kumele ukuthi kugezwe umuzi, ihlazo naye lwengane igezwe. Does it make sense? So it doesn't matter whether the man or the woman steps out and has a child outside to protect the purity and cleanliness of umuzi. Because remember, umsamo wako umama no baba, in order for you to have the cleanliness and purity of umuzi, both man and woman, if they cheat, must cleanse umuzi. I learned if only the man can cheat but the woman can't, or vice versa. Sorry. Okay. Let me just read a couple of questions here. So someone's asking me to do it in Zulu. I am sorry that I'm choosing English because we do have people from other countries and other ethnic groups that need this knowledge and wisdom, and it would be unfair to them for me to limit it using language. So I am going to do it specifically in English. So yeah. So I am sorry if the patriarchy in some people has been shaken and misunderstood, but ngokwesintu and ngokwetongo, guys. Remember, we are focusing on itongo, not necessarily. So what we need to be careful of, we mustn't pick and choose when to apply isintu nesiko. That being said, if if the father and the mother, uMazuma no Baba Dlamini, they separate ngokwephepha, still she has ngokwesintu, uMazuma has right to claim over uDlamini's estate should he pass away 10, 30, 40 years after the fact that they were married. Because ngokwesintu, it divorce to undo umgaqo, and that process isn't there, if you make sense. Okay, I'm just going to take this question. A friend of mine separated with a girl which he paid lobola for. The girl was later paid for lobola by another person who should receive that lobola. Okay, so if your friend separated with the girl that he had paid lobola for, I assume that she wasn't pregnant or there was no child because you haven't mentioned the child. There is nothing wrong with that. They must simply both cleanse and they can part ways amicably. And the new gentleman that is going to be paying the lobola is going to be lobolaring uzo lobola Leon Dombazana, and that family will take the lobola. Okay. Which brings me to my next point. Until all three parts have been done, umuntu wesifazana cannot change her surname. You are not married. All right. So I want us to understand that ukuthi, a lot of people, especially young people, were making the mistake of changing our surname once lobola has been done. Right? He's paid lobola, I can change my surname. No. You keep your maiden surname. Only once you have been introduced to the family by blood can you change your surname. So now, inkinga, sometimes they're not in the sense of inkinga don't start ngesikhathi sikipita or fat and set or whatever you want to call it, but they start because ngesikhathi nikipita you have already changed your surname only after ilobola, but not after the wedding has taken place. Right? Okay. Next. Right. Now we're talking, I'm just going to take Grace's question here. I'm married traditionally and lobola is paid. My family slaughtered to accept my husband as the son-in-law. I was not accepted as the daughter-in-law and mother-in-law liked me. Now me and my husband are having a 6 months staying at the house and not talking to each other due to his fault. Now he wants the family that were part of the lobola to go to my family and tell that he no longer wants to stay with me. How do I go about this matter since we did not sign at Home Affairs? So because you didn't sign at Home Affairs, look, I'm not too concerned about what happens at Home Affairs. I'm here to give you the spirituality behind everything so everyone understands the spirituality behind surnames. Since you are saying that you and your husband, you see, slaughtering only happened on one side. So 50% of it took place. Right? So, Grace, you are still to keep your mother's maiden surname, but because your husband walobola, right? The child that you have with him will be of his surname. I hope that makes sense. But your surname still remains your mother's maiden surname. Okay, you can still part ways should you wish to do so, and you can still remarry perfectly fine and take his surname, and your kids will have the new man's surname because you haven't been introduced by blood to your husband's surname, if that makes sense. Okay. Right. So now we're going on to partial wedlock, and I think I'm going to spend some time on partial wedlock because it is a huge mistake that we do as young people, well, Generation A, and we don't know how to actually correct it or navigate about it. And I briefly touched on it. Partial wedlock, let's say for instance, lobola has been paid, right? You may or may have not done umembers, or EBs, that doesn't matter. But umgaqo, the actual traditional wedding, has not taken place, right? That means, okay, for women, you still keep your mother's maiden surname. B, for men, you cannot go around saying, this is my wife. She is still ingoduso. She is still a fiancé. That's the first thing. 2, should she fall pregnant after ilobolo, the child that she gives birth to is bongo saka Dlamini, the man's family, right? Because you have paid ilobolo, right? So the child, so essentially it's almost like you've loboled ingane already. So the child will still keep the surname yaka Dlamini, right? And that child cannot change the surname to the mother's maiden surname, even if the mother and the father after ilobola don't make it to umcaco. I repeat, in the event umuntu wesifazana falls pregnant after ilobola has been paid or ibizo have been done, she's still of her maiden surname's family, right? The child she will give birth to will still be waka Dlamini, right? That child cannot change the surname. That child cannot decide what you know. I actually don't like. I want to go back to my mother's maiden surname. No. So genile, no one-way valve. Which, another thing, guys, when you change surnames, if you change surnames correctly the first time round, you can't go back. Changing surnames, when you do it correctly, listen to what I'm saying. When you do it correctly, it's almost like a one-way valve. You kind of sort of can't go back if it's done correctly. And I'll explain further, right? So now the biggest mistake that we're doing is women are taking surnames too soon. Wait for the gentleman to actually complete everything and umcaco to take place before you go around calling yourself Mrs. Spanban. Alright. So in the event of partial wedlock, okay, has ilobola been paid? No. If ilobola hasn't been paid, no, then the child stays izoya yarazum. Lobola has been paid, then she falls pregnant, then that child will be yaka Dlamini. Now, the biggest thing another thing people do is we hide ukuthi cha when the pregnancy occurred. Let's take note of that. Don't hide when the pregnancy occurred. Did the pregnancy occur before or after ilobolo? Because if it occurs before ilobolo took place, then therefore you need to pay inhlawulo and ilobolo, and then the child will still be yours, still be yaka Dlamini, even if you and your wife don't make it to umcaco. Okay? However, if the pregnancy, and so don't hide when the pregnancy takes place. Because sometimes we hide when the pregnancy takes place, we wait for ilobolo to take place, to occur, ilobolo gets paid, and then we come out and say, no, I was pregnant. I'm pregnant. Leyo ngane is going to be in trouble because kunenhlawulo that needs to be paid for leyo ngane. So you're doing your child a disservice by hiding the fact that you were pregnant before ilobola was completed and took place. Okay. Right. I've just covered that what we do when we have kids before ilobola. Before, if you're gonna have kids before ilobola, inhlawulo needs to be paid. 2, ilobolo needs to be paid. 3, and then umcaco needs to be paid. So I'm gonna get to co-parenting now and what happens well, let me actually tuck into it now. So let's say you and the man and the woman, right? Okay. Decide to have it. So they have a child, right? They want to get married, but they financially don't have the means to do it right now, right? I'll explain to you what you do. When the child is born, write down the mother's surname. Let the child have the mother's surname. Okay? Then, when andota, go to the family and say, Nansi nhlawulo, but don't pay lobola. And it's you want to marry her. If you want to marry her, I'm telling you what you must do as a man. Khokha inhlawulo, right? Okay? Ungayikhokhi lobola. Say, I want the child to remain the mother's surname. Then, when you have the financial means to kishwi lobolo and do whatever for the wedding, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna welcome them into your family, and they're gonna both take your surname at the same time. Does that make sense? So you'll pay inhlawulo, not ilobolo. You'll wait it out, acquire the funds, and then they'll both come to your family once you've paid ilobolo and once you've also paid for umgaco and umembezo. So, okay, here's another question here, which I think is interesting. Please explain when a woman gets married having a child already with someone else. Okay, so you have a boyfriend or whomever, whatever the case may be, you fall pregnant, but you then eventually meet the man that you want to spend the rest of your life with, right? I'm assuming that's the case. Okay, let me point out both scenarios. If you are carrying a child of another man, and that man, I'm assuming now that the man doesn't want anything to do with it, in the event he doesn't want anything to do with it, that child in your belly can never be that new father's child. Never. It's another mistake we do. If you are a woman and you are pregnant right now with another man's child, but you're in love with another man, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. You want to move on and live your best life. But that man will pay ilobolo for you and you alone. Leo ngane will take your maiden surname and it will remain your mother's maiden surname. The only person who can change that child's name is the father's, is that child's biological father, not the stepdad. All right. All the stepdad can do is raise the child. When the child is grown, abonga at the stepdad's family. Thank you for raising me. And that's it. Okay. Right. Now the next scenario is absenteeism. When the parents, let's just assume, well, so I'm going to cover it from both parts. So you can't see there. So I'm going to cover it from both angles. Like what happens if either the man or the woman or mazuma or yamini just decides to up and disappear and they don't want anything to do with the child. Okay. Let's assume that no lobola has taken place. Damages may or may not have been paid. No wedding, no membeso, absolutely nothing. Right? Okay. What happens now is okay, so those with questions regarding their parents, please keep them and hold them. I'm going to move on to what happened. Remember, scenario A is us, the youth. Scenario B, I'm focusing on our parents' mistakes. At the moment, I'm looking at our mistakes. Okay. Let's say I have a child with a woman. She up and disappears, right? We weren't married. Nothing happened. But I raise this child. I spend my money and my time and my love, and I look after the child and I grow this child until this child, even if the child is about maybe 4 or 5 or 3 or 4, but I've raised this child. Okay? And now we decide to go to the family. I'm like, look, I want to do things right. I go to the family, right? And I say, look, I would like this child to have my surname. Inganyami. I understand that your daughter has up and disappeared and left me with the child, but I would like to look after this child. Because you have raised that child, the grooming, the effort, the hard work, the love, and the nurturing that you have put in over the years qualifies as inklawulo nelobolo for ingane. Right? The love and affection and grooming and raising you've done for that child qualifies you as in daughter to go to that family and say, I would like that to be used as ilobolo and inklawulo. All I'm asking from you as the family is, please can you slaughter a goat to release that child over there so we can slaughter a goat here and welcome her into the family. Okay. Now, as a woman, if the man disappears, right, and decides he wants to come back into the child's life, the first thing that you have every right to do is demand inklawulo, i.e. damages. But you are under no obligation to accept ilobolo and change the child's surname and let them change the child's surname. No. You are well within your rights to refuse ilobolo and accept inklawulo. Okay. And you can say, look, we'll accept inklawulo, the damages and your apology for just up and leaving and disappearing. However, we just feel that we're happy with the child being here at home with the maiden surname. Maybe once the child is older, 21, 22, or let's just use 18, then the child can make their own decision and the child can go home and ask the elders, look, I understand what happened between Uma and Baba. Please, can you release me either way? Okay. Right. If your mother, so I'm going to take another question. If your father never paid inhlawulo to your mother and later found out that they are related, do you use your father's surname, especially if you need to phahla? No. Also, when you say they're related, there's degrees of relation. Depending on how close they are in the family tree, there's degrees of how related. But I'm going to tuck into that further down the line. There's different degrees of relation. But to answer that question, no, you don't use your mother's surname. Sorry, your father's surname. You use your mother's surname because inhlawulo was not paid, ilobolo was not paid. Therefore, you cannot use your father's surname. Okay? If umntwana is inhlawula before his or her birth, then the lobola comes 2 years later. Which surname do we use? Okay, you hlawulad, then there's a 2-year break, then the lobola came. Mauhlawula, surname, the child takes the mother's surname and remains with the mother's surname during the 2-year period. Only after the lobola has been paid and as a goat or an animal has been slaughtered to release and another one has been slaughtered to enter. Once those two things have taken place, lobola and ceremony, then can the child use the father's surname. But during that 2-year break, even if it's 20-year break, mother's surname. Inhlawulo does not mean surname change. Okay, let's keep going. Co-parenting, which is a reality in South Africa, so I have to touch on co-parenting. Things work out, things don't work out. So how do we co-parent in light of isintu, isiko, and African spirituality? Let's go. Okay. Back to our table here. Uzuma no Dlamini. Okay. Let us assume that Uzuma no Dlamini did not get married, right? And then Zuma meets a strapping young gentleman from the Mkhize clan, and they actually do get married, right? Okay, well and they have a child. This child here, okay, in red, because they're not married, Mazuma. If uDlamini pays inhlawulo, still Zuma. Okay? But if I pay ilobolo and they do imfanelo exit entry, then this child is Dlamini. Even if the child doesn't live with Dlamini and he lives with Uzuma and Mkhize, this child is still Dlamini. Alright? And everything must be done by uDlamini for his child here, because walobola, wanhlawulo, and everything else. Okay? Next. Uzuma no, let's say Uzuma no Mkhize, they get married perfectly, then the child is here. This child remains Mkhize and will always be Mkhize, but these two will always be brothers. But mabe phahla, lo uzophahlela ka Mkhize, lo aphahlela ka abaga Dlamini. Does it make sense? Okay? Let's assume that Dlamini and Zuma didn't get married, but ilobolo was paid. Therefore, this child here, waga Dlamini. Okay? Zuma is well within her rights to go and find another, to marry Mkhize ngokuphelela, and she can change her surname as well. This child here will be Mkhize. Let me repeat that point again. If Uzuma no Dlamini pay ilobola benza umembeso nebizo, but they do not do umgaqo, Uzuma is still Uzuma. But the child, if conceived after ilobola, will be uDlamini. Okay? Uzuma can then, you know what, Dlamini, it's not working out. Let her, she meets a man from Mkhize. She decides to go all the way with Mkhize and does all three or all the processes. The child she has is not Dlamini because she didn't do umgaqo, remember? There's no blood that has been spilt. Therefore, this child is Mkhize, but his brother is Dlamini. There is no way this child over here can be in Mkhize. That's impossible. There's no way. Okay. Even if uDlamini passes away, this child here will still remain uDlamini. Sorry, here's another one before I end with adoption. Okay. This is life. Things happen. People pass away. In the event Zuma passes away, I'm not counting Umkhize manje. In the event uMazuma passes away, married to uDlamini ngokuphelela, full marriage, the child will obviously remain uDlamini. Okay. And depending on what abadala want, sometimes remarrying isn't an option. Sometimes for ubuntu wesilisa, sometimes abadala are just like, we're fine. We're not gonna bring anyone else. Asimfuni omunye umakoti for now or at all. Dlamini, just chill. You know. However, but in the same breath, ngoba uMazuma was married to uDlamini ngokuphelela fully. In the event uDlamini passes away, uZuma is still a child of the Dlaminis. The Dlaminis must still look after uZuma. The Dlaminis must still take care of uZuma. Okay? uMazuma, if she marries Umkhize, leyo ngane is still yakwa Dlamini, because she's still a child of this family. Right? But in the same breath, look, I know it's a tough one to swallow, but again, I go back to what I'm saying, guys. I'm not saying uMazuma mustn't remarry. I'm not saying uMazuma must remarry. I am simply stating and teaching. That is all I'm doing. uMazuma is well within her rights to go out and live her best life. But she must understand what it means for the child that she has. And also, the gentleman that she marries must also understand. Now, the Dlamini family must also remember that this is a lifetime commitment. That even though our son uDlamini is not around, we need to still look after uZuma. Simnakekele, simthande. So we mustn't pick and choose when to apply culture based on gender or socioeconomic context. Okay. Right. Okay, let's keep going. Let's go on to adoption. Now, let us say we adoption is a reality because not everyone can conceive kids or have kids, right? Or maybe they can have kids, things happen, and they decide to adopt a second kid. So let's say uMazuma and uDlamini have married completely perfectly, and they had their first child. Obviously, their child is going to be Dlamini. They're still happy. They're grand. They want a second child, but they can't conceive a child for whatever reason, whether it comes from the man or the woman. That's not really important. But they decide that they want to adopt a child. Now, we need to think about adoption from 2 points. Are we adopting from inside the family or outside the family? And also, the surname in terms of historically who are your relatives, you need to think about, especially when you're going to adopt outside the family. Let me explain. Okay. When you want to do adoption, it is quite simple and straightforward in the sense that it's no different to you simply introduce that adopted child to the family, right? In that you simply slaughter a goat, nibike Umsamo ukuthi cha nansi ingane siyangenisa la ekhaya, nimenzele imbeleko for that child. Okay? Now, that's adoption outside the family. But if you're going to adopt outside the family, be cognizant of that child's history, especially when it comes to isibongo, right? Because what you might find is abadala know you want to adopt, and they bring you a child which is historically isihlobo sakho, if that makes sense. So that's another thing to be cognizant of when it comes to history of individuals. And if you're adopting inside the family, right? Let's give an example. Let me give an example. Okay. Let's say uMazuma had a sister, right? Her sister had a child, passed away, but nothing was done for that child. Therefore, that child remains yakazuma, right? The sister of uMazuma, uZuma decides to marry uDlamini, and they're like, look, we want to look after this child. There's nothing that needs to be done for that child. Leyo ngane remains ingane yakwaZuma. There is no way that child can be ingane kaDlamini. As much as Dlamini, you may love that child, you can't adopt your niece in terms of and give him your surname. You can't do that, right? And because there's no need, that child will remain ingane yakwaZuma. But again, when that child grows up, they must say thank you because wabakhulisa. Okay? Abakadlamini gave you the strength ukuthi ukhulise ingane. Right? So that is, so adoption is, I mean, it seems complicated, but it's very straightforward. It's just, is it in or outside the family? If we're going to go outside the family, can we trace down the family? Are we going to be allowed to trace down the family so we can actually go through imfanelo properly? I'm not sure. That is where there's a lot of instances where the courts and seem to bayaphambanisa and akambelani, because we need access to the family so that imfanelo can be done. But I'm not sure. I think by law, you're not allowed to actually have contact with the actual biological parents. I'm not sure how that works. The lawyers that are watching this can you guys can comment below what the law says about that. So that is how adoption works. Okay. So now, hold on. Okay. So now I'm going to go to. So I see Uluqa here is talking about her husband using her father's surname while they didn't pay inhlawulo. Okay, so now I'm going to go to our parents' problems. We're moving on now. Now we're looking at, okay, what have our parents done that's filtering down to us? We're going to now look at scenario B, which is second generation problems. And I'm hoping that this will pretty much answer everything. So with the knowledge that I've given you in the first part, you should be able to track and keep and kind of answer before I even say anything, right? Okay. Abantu besimame bakhuluma ilobolo. Okay, so I'm just trying to read the question properly. So can abantu besimame handle ilobolo? Yeah, they can, I guess. So I'm just reading a question here at the very, very top about abantu besifazane handling ilobolo, and I different cultures have different things. I know with Amasutu, they can have women in groups handling ilobolo. So really, at the end of the day, as long as we're cognizant of ubano shisimpepo. And I've actually spoken about that on one of my interviews about ubano. As long as we're cognizant about ubano shisimpepo when we're actually having the ceremonies and carrying out the ceremonies, then actually who's actually taking care of ilobolo, that'll be dependent on your culture. I guess at the end of the day, right? No, Kanya, don't worry. There's problems, but we're here to provide solutions. So now here you are in the middle, and now we're looking at your parents, and we're talking about your parents, looking at what your parents have done or have not done. Okay. Let us say your mother. Let's say your mother and your father do perfect wedlock. Everything's done. Lobolo done. Umembeso done. Umcaco done. You can only ever have your father's surname. If you are conceived after perfect wedlock, you can only ever have your father's surname. You cannot do anything else. No matter how terrible of a man your father is, you keep your father's surname. You die with your father's surname. Unless you're a woman. If you're a woman, you can marry into another family. And if you're a man, the people that must handle your lobolo negotiations must be abakadlamini, even if your mother and father decide to part ways, because your wife uyongena kwadlamini, uzogida kwadlamini, amagcekeni kadlamini. Amalobolo will be paid for by udlamini. All right. So that's pretty straightforward. For instance, I was conceived post perfect wedlock. I can never be anything but Mkhize. And my wife can be never. Should we do everything correctly? Can never be anything but Mkhize. Okay. Now we are back at. Let me just move this. Okay. Now we're back at wedlock and remarriage. So again, in the event, let's say your mother and father are divorced or they parted ways legally, but they did their marriage completely. They had a full marriage, a full cultural and ancestral marriage. You will always have your father's surname, right? And okay, so now let's say your mother remarries. He remarries Mkhize. Okay. I'm not going to pay too much attention to the child that your mom may or may not have with Mkhize. But I'll get to it now. Let's say your father, Dlamini, your mother, Zuma, they get married perfectly, but then they divorce. That's why the squiggly line is there. And there's you. You keep your father's surname, Dlamini, but then your mother marries Mkhize, right? And let's say Mkhize takes you in, because obviously the child always goes with the mother. Mkhize takes you in, he looks after you, he loves you as one of his own, your stepdad. Stepdad and his family deserve to be thanked when you're older, right? Should you decide to get married, before you get married. Secondly, you cannot have your stepdad run your wedding or your lobolo negotiations. You need to go to Abaga Dlamini. And your wedding, your new wife, I'm speaking from a man's perspective, right? In the event you want to get married, but you've been raised by the Mkhizes and the Zumas, you've been raised by them, the gentleman from Mkhize. Step 1, thank the Mkhizes for raising you. Step 2, go back to the Dlaminis and say, look, I'd like to get married. I wanna have a wife. What the Dlaminis then do is they are the ones that actually go to your wife's family and start the negotiations. The Mkhizes have nothing to do with the negotiation, right? And even then, right, your wife that you marry, ngesikhathi ekhishwa khona uzongeniswa la emagcekeni kaDlamini. Obviously, the whole Mkhize family and clan can be invited to the wedding because they raised you, they groomed you. It would be inappropriate to not invite the whole Mkhize clan, even though it's taking place kwa Dlamini. They should invite the Mkhize clan and actually welcome them with open arms because they raised ingane yabo. Okay. Now the biggest mistake that happens here is people either hate their dad, so they just say, you know what, I'm going back to my mom's maiden surname with her. And then their mother remarries, and they either take their mother's maid, they either take Mkhize, or they stay as Zuma. If your parents had married completely, and you decided to go back to your mother's maiden surname with her, you need to go back to Dlamini. You can't decide that I want to be a Zuma because I didn't like my dad. At the end of the day, things were done correctly. You were conceived within perfect wedlock. Therefore, your surname can only be Dlamini and will be Dlamini, right? Hold on. I just want to see here. Sorry, someone's asking me, what happens to children born in interracial marriages and no slaughtering is done? Ever. I'm going to answer that right now. Let me just wrap up. Let me just finish this one here. Okay. So, gentlemen, if you don't like your dad, keep your son. Now, women, let's say you're a woman, right? And your parents are divorced, you go off with your mom and you stay with Mkhize. Same thing happens. You need to say thank you. You need to thank the Mkhizes. But when you are lobolad, it is not your mother's family that can take care of you. You are not going to be released, nor can you be released from the Zumas because you are not a child of Zuma. You are a child of Dlamini. So you need to go back to Abaga Dlamini and say, look, now I want to be lobolad, okay? Please can you help me with it and carry everything through. You cannot have this done by the Mkhizes, nor can it be done by the Zumas. And Geskatu Kishwa, if you're a woman, you cannot have when you're released from your family, it must be released emagcekeni kwa Dlamini. You cannot be released la kwa Mkhize. Okay. You need to be released where amathonga kini nenkabi yakho igcitshwe khona la emagcekeni kaDlamini. Yikho nje sigciba inkabi, but I'll get to that later ukuthi la ugcitshwa khona inkabi. It's either la uzongena khona la noma la uzokhishwa khona. But anyway, that's indaba yenkabi it's another topic for another day. Let's just stay on track. Okay? So that's what we need to understand. Right? And let's say, so please, I'm speaking to now, be cognizant or know what happened between your mother and father, whether it was good or bad, right? And you need to accept the reality of whatever happened, good or bad. Okay. So Again, let's say now we're going back to perfect wedlock and what happens when we have infidelity again. Now let's say your dad decides to step out on your mom and has a child outside. Okay, you are conceived in perfect wedlock. You're here where my arrow is, where my cursor is. Your surname is Dlamini, right? Your surname will always remain Dlamini, but your father decides to sleep with Umam Tembu and have a child. Okay? Them Tembus, and let's say your father passes away, right? And your mother passes away. Okay? Them Tembus cannot say that this child has right to your estate or this child Yagajamin. Nor can this child say Minewagajamin. Unless Abagajamini go and do Inklaulo, Ilobolo, Nembelego for this particular child. Right? This child has no right to claim over anything of Bagajamini unless imfanelo have been done. Bagajamini. Okay? Now let's say your mother decides to be the one to step out on your dad and have a child. Right? As hard as it is going to be for you here to accept this child here that he's had with Umkiza, your mother, this child, all that needs to be done, that's all that needs to happen. This child has right to claim over the estate. This child can actually be the one that leads things should everyone else that was conceived in perfect wedlock babed. Because uma wakhe umazuma bekuyingane yakadlamini ngoba kwacaca kwaphela kwenziwa yonke into. Everything was done perfectly. All right. Sorry, this child here. Sorry, I was referring to the wrong. Sorry. My apologies. This child here and Dlamini, you are not half, but this child is a Dlamini. You need to accept this child as a Dlamini. Right? If this child comes with your mother, even though it was with Umkize, you need to accept. In the event your father steps out, if nothing's been done, you can accept emotionally, but not ngokwesintu. That's why I'm saying, guys, don't pick and choose when to apply isintu nesiko. Right. How to correct this? It's simple. You just need to kugezwa ihlazo. So uMazuma would go to Bagajamini saying, this is what happened. Nansi ngani khona agyona yakajamini. So then what happens is lengane nomuzi nehlazo liyagezwa kuphela. By blood mhlanganisa igazi nomswane nenyimithi geza umuzi geza umama nobaba nengane. And then this child here, even though the mother had the child with Mkize, carries on with the Dlamini surname. Everything will happen here. The only relationship this child can have with the Dlaminis is purely emotional. So I pity these children the most. The ones that are... this one here is honestly... These kids are in the hardest positions because, unfortunately, there's too many secrets. And we're not judging. We're just saying, come forward and tell us. We can't help you if you don't tell us the full story. No one's going to hate you or judge you. But we need to know the full story. Okay. So that is why infidelity is so deep. And even if the father cheats, still kumele ukuthi kugeza umuzi ngoba ngesikhathi elala nomthembu he doesn't know ukuthi umamthembu unani. It's even worse if naye umamthembu uganile kodwa still ujola noDlamini. Because then kunesinyama endlini, and then when this child here, when let's say you're like, no, if my dad cheats, it's okay, but if my mom does, maybe you have that double standard. I don't know. In the event your father steps out on your mother, alale nomthembu, nomamthembu, akazi ukuthi umamthembu unani. Ubaba wakho comes back endlini nalento ngoba ngithulale nomunye umuntu wesifazana oganile izoshaya wena la Dlamini. So you can keep your double standard, but remember at the end of the day, if you think that what your father does and what your mother does, they both, umsamo wako is both father and mother, not just your father. Okay. Now we're going to partial wedlock. In the event your mother and father paid lobolo, but they did everything but the actual process of umqado. Depending on when you were conceived, that will guide, that'll determine whether or not you take your mother's surname, whether or not you take your father's surname indefinitely, and that cannot be changed, or whether or not you take your mother's surname, and that can be changed, right? So if it happened before ilobolo, right? Let's say it happened before ilobolo, okay? If it happened before ilobolo, then kumele ukuthi uhlawulwe and ulobolo for leongane as well as the mother, and then you can get married, and then that child will be udlamini. But if it happened after ilobolo, indefinitely you are your father's surname. You have your father's surname. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So what about isthembu? Isthembu works. Isthembu. I think I'm gonna actually have a separate class for isthembu. The origins, the 5 different ways what Abadala can ask you for isthembu. And I will explain exactly how isthembu comes about, Baba. Thank you very much for lambuzo. Melusi ngiyabonga. I'll definitely explain that in a separate class. So that is how it works, right? Partial wedlock. Ask your mother and father, Ma, was blood spilled to release you and blood spilled to bring you in? And if she says no, then they weren't married. They were married ngokomthetho, but they were married ngokwephepha, hayi ngokwesintu. They were saying uma wakho still ingoduso. And then you say, okay, Ma, was lobola paid? And she says, yes. Okay, Ma, when was I conceived? Before or after? Ati, no, you were conceived before. You're like, okay, wait. So now you need to know that you were conceived before ilobolo was paid, and your parents didn't make it past ilobolo. Therefore, you are your mother's surname. And your father needs to do right udlamini if they want you to be udlamini. I hope that makes sense. I just want to take a question here. My mother was paid lobolo, but married only the English way. We have never taken out a surname. I was never received by my father. Who should take ilobolo? Okay, let me read that again. So if your mother was ilobolo was paid for mawako, but they only married the English way. Therefore, your mother must keep her maiden surname, right? Your mother must keep her maiden surname. Lobola was paid for her. Okay. So I'm not sure when you're not saying when you were conceived, whether it was before or after, but I'm going to assume it was after. So because you were conceived after your mother, lobola was paid for your mother, then you take your father's surname because you were conceived after your lobola was paid for your mother. But in the event that you were conceived before ilobolo, you take your mother's maiden surname. So who should take ilobolo? It is your father's side of the family. They are the ones that are supposed to take ilobolo because you are your father's surname, because you were assuming of course that you were conceived after ilobolo. Right. Is Tembo I've taken? Oh yes, I said I was going to answer. What about interracial couples? Okay, so interracial couples need to be cognizant of this. You need to understand that if I'm marrying a black person, or I am deciding to spend my rest of my life with a black person, there are certain rituals which need to take place. You need to do it, right? You need to spill blood. In that, if you're a black woman marrying a white man, he needs to do the same thing. He needs to pay lobolo. His father, even though he's a white father, needs to slaughter a cow to bring you in. You can't have your father can't, as unomzana wasekhaya nobaba wakho, akuhlabela inkomo, aphahle kubadala athi cha, sesiyamkhipha. Wazothi ye wena Dlamini, ukhipha ingane yethu uyishonsaphi? You know, your father needs to release you from this home knowing that somewhere along the line, someone's going to accept you. Or else, because remember, once you have been released, you cannot come back. So your father cannot release you uvele uhlale esigangeni nje unganayi indawo la khona sesiphahlile kumathongo sesibatshelile ukuthi cha nansi ingane yenu. You know? I'm addressing it now, the interracial issue, right? So even though we are different colors, itongo yitongo, umsamo. So the principles still apply. Okay. Absenteeism still it's a reality. Now let's say your dad was not there. Your dad was a bit of a deadbeat. You need to ask yourself, when was I conceived and under what circumstances? Now, the circumstance I have written here, no lobolo was paid. Damages may or may not have been paid. Nothing happened for you. Therefore, you stay a Zuma, right? Here. You stay Zuma. Okay? And everything must be Zuma. Zuma's handle your lobola. Everything happens for Zuma, right? In the event you're 20, 21, 22, 30 or whatever, and your dad decides to make a comeback into your life, he's more than welcome to. And he says, no, I want you to have my surname. That is completely dependent on you as to whether or not you want to change your surname to Dlamini. Right? That is completely up to you. You are under no obligation to take your father's surname, nor will your life, and don't let anyone threaten you with saying, if you don't take your father's surname, things will end up badly. Guys, there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking your mother's surname. I'm using my grandmother's surname. My father, Dr. Vivo Omkise, he's using his mother's surname because our grandfather didn't do Infidelity that needed to be done. So hence we are Mkise, right? And you guys can see where Dr. Mkise is now in his life, and he's using his mother's surname. And in actual fact, you know, sometimes, especially when you're older, sometimes you're not necessary. Sometimes things happen for a reason, guys. And if you didn't end up with your father's surname because things weren't done, don't force things. Don't force your father to do the things that he's supposed to do if he wants you to have his surname. Take your mother's surname, be content with your mother's surname, marry with your mother's surname, and your kids can have your mother's surname. I'm obviously speaking from a male's perspective, and they can continue with your mother's surname. Right? Don't force your father and say, no, guys, if your father doesn't want you to have his surname, if he wanted to have his surname, he would have done things correctly. So, Nati, as young people, we need to accept things for how they are. And it's tough because, you know, sometimes it's nice to have that validation of your father's surname if that's about, you know, obviously speaking from the privilege of having my father's surname, so bear that in mind. Bear that in mind, please. But don't force your father's hand or that family. Okay. Co-parenting. Now, this time for co-parenting, I'm going to actually speak about co-parenting from both sides. Okay. Let's say your mother and father, right, got married, but they didn't actually follow through with umgaqo, right? I think the most important question you guys should ask your parents and grandparents is, did umgaqo take place? Because that is so key. Were you conceived before or after ilobol, right? There you are. Here's your mother, Dlamini. Sorry, your father, Dlamini. Here's your mother, Zuba, right? Let's say now marriage was incomplete, but they did ilobol. And then they got divorced, right? If you were conceived before ilobolo was paid, let's say you were conceived after ilobolo was paid, and they didn't make it to the full umgaqo, you take your father's surname, Dlamini, right? And then if your father then remarries, your father remarries Uzwane, your half brother, right? This child, let's say Uzwane no Dlamini marry fully. This child here is going to be a Zwane, a Dlamini. Now you are going to be a Dlamini. Okay? If this child, right, okay, has things not done properly for him, right? Let's say Uzwan no Dlamini don't get married and they also don't make it the whole way. But this child is conceived before ilobol. Therefore, lengana gyona Dlamini yakazwana. When you can tell this child was Lalandot, you don't have claim here. Unless Abaga Dlamini go and do what is right. You are Zwane. And the same can be said for here on the other side, in the event your mother decides to marry Umkhize. Okay. Adoption, pretty straightforward as well. But the one thing I will say to you as young people, if you know that your parents have adopted someone, then I would urge you to speak to your parents, if it was an outside adoption, to do things right, bring the child into the family, and make the child a proper full-fledged Yamini, if assuming your mother and father were born in complete perfect wedlock. Now I'm just going to spend the last 20 minutes or so just answering questions. I'm just going to be answering questions that I'm seeing here. This is the first time using this platform, and I do not like the fact that I can't actually get people to come on and speak, and I can't actually share the platform with people and actually answer while seeing someone else. So I'm definitely going to tell the team to work on that, and I'm going to find a platform where I can speak to you and you can actually see me, you know. Okay, right. Taking some questions. What happens in a case whereby parents are married perfectly and you discover that you have Ihlozi from your mother's side and Umama doesn't know anyone from her family who had a calling? No, that is perfectly fine. That does happen. The most important thing, sorry about that. The most important thing that should happen, there's nothing wrong if you accept if Kwamazako, they come from your mother's side of the family. That's not a problem. You need to go for a consultation, find out what it's through that consultation, through umpahlo, through dreams, that you'll find out the exact person, the name of the person that gave you Lezo Ikwama. But you don't change your surname just because Ikwama come from your mother's side of the family. You still remain with your father's family, and it's just that the person who gave you those gifts happens to come from your mother's side of the family. That's it. Oh yes, ingane ezumlanjwana nengane bangwayo. We like this term, ingane bangwayo. I remember now that I actually want to speak about this. Ingane bangwayo. We need to understand that umuntu ungane omlanjwana ngeke ibangwe between the two families unless kunekwama involved, nobunyanga involved. That is when ingane iyabangwa. But if aziki kwama or ubunyanga or ihlozi involved, then leyo ngane ngeke ibangwe. Right? So Dr. Mkhize naye wathi wabangwa kancane because bengekho ukubangwa, in the sense that naturally the ikwama ziqhamuka from ugogo's side, right? So we need to be careful of how we use this term ingane bangwayo, you know, and we need to be cognizant of umbango is only involved when a child is conceived out of wedlock and kwama that need to be taken. You know, mhlawumbe, what happens in that instance is things are not done. So obviously out of wedlock, child takes the mother's surname, but kwama that are meant to come from the father's surname. That's when umbango comes about. Does it make sense? Or ilwambango that you need to sort out ngoba kwama involved. Okay. Which surname does the adopted child use? The adopted child will use the adopted child. Okay, in the event of perfect wedlock, the adopted child will use the father's surname. In the event of perfect wedlock. In the event of imperfect wedlock, right? Let's say, for instance, Odlamini no Zuma missed out on a step and they didn't realize that they were meant to do umqato, and Zuma took Dlamini's surname and all the kids have Dlamini's surname inappropriately. What needs to happen then is you need to correct the surname. The kids need to correct the surname in the sense of they need to go back and they need to do umgaqo again. They actually need to do it. Then Uzuma can come across. Then Uzuma can come to the Dlaminis. Nazo ingane can also come to the Dlaminis as well. That's what, so the adopted child, depending if it's perfect wedlock, would use that the father's surname. In the event that let's say Umazuma is not married to Dlamini anymore, and they didn't do umgaqo, that child will take Zuma's surname if the mother decides to adopt the child. Things do get tricky if Uzuma no Dlamini are married in perfect wedlock. Dlamini and Zuma part ways and divorce, but Zuma decides to adopt a child. Because yena useyingane yaga Dlamini no longer yaga Zuma. That child should be yaga Zuma, but they divorced. So that's when things get actually a little difficult to navigate. Okay. Yeah, one question. What surname is correct for a child that was paid for in Intlawulo and Lobolo was started, but the mom's surname was not correct? What do you mean by that? Let me just make this. So surname is what? What surname is correct for a child that Intlawulo was paid, Ilobolo was paid? Started, but the mom's surname was not correct. I need a bit more information in terms of your family tree so we can actually look back and see what is the correct surname, what circumstances determined, what makes you say that your mom's surname was not correct. And also, when was the child conceived? Before or after Intlawulo nelobol. That's also the kind of information that I need. Because if the child was conceived after Intlawulo and Ilobolo was paid, even though the mother's surname is incorrect, that child will still take the father's surname if it was after Intlawulo and Ilobolo. If it was after Ilobolo, sorry. In the event that the child was conceived, it can only be after Intlawulo and Ilobolo. So, yeah, even though the mother's surname was incorrect, that child where Intlawulo and Ilobolo was paid, that child must take the father's surname. Because it doesn't necessarily matter that the mother's surname is incorrect. The fact that Ilobolo and Intlawulo was... You see, the mother having an incorrect surname really has implications when it comes to umgaqo. That you need to leave the right surname to enter. You can't, the place of origin needs to be correct, if that makes sense. So that's when really we begin to look at the mother's surname is when it comes to umgaqo, Okay, so my granny did not want to marry my granddad, but my father used his father's surname, so we also use it. Is that okay? But he was paid in Intlawulo for. No, that is not okay. Let me explain. Your granny didn't marry your grandfather, right? So that's not perfect wedlock. Scratch that scenario. Intlawulo was paid, but Ilobolo was not paid. And on top of that, imfanelo in terms of slaughtering a goat to exit and slaughtering a goat to entry was not paid. Therefore, the surname you guys should be using is your grandmother's maiden surname. But don't stress. I was actually going to explain this in the following one, but I'll say it now. In the event a problem has skipped a generation, please look here on the diagram so I can explain. This is you here. This is you here, you and your partner. Okay? The problem originates here with the grandparents. Because it has skipped a generation, all you do, ni Umsamo, ni hlabe imbuzi, nixolise, niphahle kubadala ukuthi cha, siyazi ukuthi there was an incorrect surname that was used. Therefore, we'd like to continue with the incorrect surname. Because the problem has skipped a generation, you can't do that. However, you only do that if ugogo nomkhulu and your mother and father are unwilling to fix the problem. In the event that they are, go back. Nonke need to change your surnames to your grandmother's maiden surname. If they are willing to. And if they are not willing to, then you can just, because skip the generation, nonke nenziwe imbuzi to say yazini badala. We understand that this mistake happened 2 generations back, 1, 2, and we would like to carry on with the incorrect surname. That you can do. Okay. Okay, Zetu, thank you very much for answering Undando's question. Okay, I've answered. Whoa, there we go. Sorry, I lost my cursor. That answered that question. So someone's asking why I'm on Tomazana Kiza Etelele. I have 2 children with 1 and I paid a little for her. I still love her though. I'm going to cover that in the next conversation. I'm going to cover that in the next one. Okay. Let me just answer a few questions higher up. Is it possible to buy a child as a mom to avoid umbango? What do you mean? Possible to buy a child as a mom to avoid umbango? As a mother, you never need to buy a child. In the event, you need to ask yourself, by the fact that you're talking about umbango, I assume that you and your husband are not going to get married, therefore full marriage is out of the question. I also assume that in Inklawulo no lobolo, remember what I said, in Inklawulo you must demand from the man, demand it, you have every right to demand so. Ilobolo, you don't have to accept it, you don't have to buy a child as umama wengane. As a mom, you never have to pay for a child. If you are the one giving birth to the child, you never have to pay for the child. Okay? Where's my cursor? There we go. Thank you, David, for answering Umbuzo La Faith. Thank you very much, David. Thanks for that. Okay. So, Mapi, my mom waqaqa, but unfortunately her husband passed on. Years after she met my biological father and we were conceived out of wedlock because neither lobolo nor damages were paid. We are using her late husband's surname. Is that okay? Let me read that again. Sorry, guys. So your mother, waqaqa, husband passed on. Okay? Years later, she met your biological father and you were conceived out of wedlock because neither lobola nor damages were paid. We are using her late husband's surname. Yes, that is perfect, Mapi. Yes, correct. 100% correct. It's exactly what I was going back to. Even though your mother Usaingane of the first husband's family, you are correct to use, well done, Mapi. You guys are correct to use her late husband's surname. The husband la ebe kon. Because even though you were conceived by another man, umawak Usaingane of her late husband's family. Yep, perfect. Why do I keep losing my cursor? Here we go. In the event of perfect wedlock, it appears that Dlamini can't have children and they decide to go for artificial insemination. Which surname does the child take? Still Dlamini. Still Dlamini, guys. Ooh. Yep, still Dlamini. Yep, still Dlamini. Okay, so thank you very much, Lebogang. I think what Lebogang has made me realize is that I actually need to have a part 2 to this in which I speak about special circumstances. In other words, IVF, artificial insemination. What else is there? Yeah, I need to speak about special circumstance, more particularly with people that are members of the LGBTQ plus community as well. I think I need to have a special. Actually, Lebogang, thank you very much for that. I'm going to actually tell the team I'm going to send them an email after this. I'm going to tell them that we need to schedule a special session where I'm going to address specifically those depending on how insemination take place. But to answer your question, even though Udlamini Nomazuma, Udlamini can't have children. If Udlamini decide they go to official insemination, right? And they decide that they're going to use. It depends. Like, I need to know: are you referring to them using an outside sperm or an outside egg? But I think I'm gonna have a special one for that. Let me have a special one for that because I also want to include the right scientific terminology as well, and I'm not prepared in terms of slideshow presentation. Okay. Why do I keep losing this cursor? Okay. Oh, there's a dream here. I dreamt about your partner's elders coming to visit you before he approached me. Does that mean anything? I think I've spoken about dreams before, and I think there's also a post about love and relationships and also dreams. Please just refer to the company Facebook page for that. Hold on. Snake Kuku, what do you mean when you say how though? Your father paid at the wrong surname. I need to know that. Please, Snake Kuku, help me with that. Okay. I'm just gonna explain Uza. So now I'm confused. Ngokubanga wengane. Even your father always says once kwaba nenkinga wabiza wrong surname. That mean we are bangwa. He always says that. Nami, I know this. Now I'm confused. Okay, so Jamini, you are correct. I was referring to when I was talking about Ubangwa, I was referring to Ikwama from Ubnyanga perspective. That's what I was referring to. But when it comes to surnames, basically what we've been covering here is exactly that. Is Ubangwa in terms of the surname is one form of manifestation of an incorrect surname, if that makes sense. That's how it can manifest, right? One of the manifestations can be in terms of Ikwama, is Bangwayo, but another manifestation of an incorrect surname can be life problems as well. So we're speaking about different facets of the same problem, if that makes sense. But yes, you are correct that ingane iyabangwa also when there is an incorrect surname as well, if that makes sense. Sorry if for causing the confusion there. Okay. Okay. Ingane Bangwaya with Ikwama. I think there's actually a video there's an interview I did a while back when I spoke about this. I'm gonna ask the team to actually drop the link to that recording. There's two actually, one I did and one Dr. Kiza did. That will actually answer that question for you. Hold on. Okay. The family that raised my girlfriend is not their biological parents. Can handle the lobola if I'm willing to pay lobola. Second, okay, so the family that raised your girlfriend is not their biological parents. Can they handle the lobola if they're not willing to pay the lobola? Second, I would like to pay lobola, but we have already 2 kids. What should happen? Must I have to pay inklawulo for both of them, then lobola for them and their mother? Okay, Bongo Musa. So I just need to know a bit more history with regards to your girlfriend. How did it happen that the people that raised her are not their biological parents? I just need a bit more history with that, so I can't really answer the first part of your question. But the second part of your question I can answer in the sense that you've already got 2 kids with her, so all that needs to happen is, as you say, you are correct. Klaulo, lobola, and then they can join your family when you actually have umcaco, then they become ilungu lomndeni. You don't, and then obviously as well, and I don't know if you've done imbeleko for them, but also it's a good idea. They also need to be done imbeleko for them. But yes, you are correct with the second part. Unfortunately, I can't answer the first part because I don't have enough information as to know how they ended up raising your girlfriend, even though they're not their biological parents, with the scenarios that I've given. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, what if the mother is divorced but still using the ex-husband's surname and got a child with another man not married to? Which surname should the child use? Okay, Musa, I'm going to assume when you say married, I'm going to assume when you say divorced, I'm going to assume that it is complete marriage in terms of what we have said. I'm going to assume that in the event that is complete marriage and she is divorced, yes, she is still correct into using her ex-husband's surname because, look, there's no way of reversing umtato. 2, the child should have the ex-husband's surname, even though it's with another man. I spoke about this in the beginning, because if it's a woman owaqaqa, kusho ukuthi usayingane of that family, and therefore the child should use the ex-husband's surname as well. Okay. Sorry, Musa. You just need to let me know whether or not it was perfect marriage or imperfect or partial or complete wedlock. I just need to know that so I can better help you out. But I'm assuming that it was perfect. Okay. Okay, ngicela ungichazele la uma uthole ingane ubaba wayo wangahlawula kuqhubeka isikhathi alobola kusalo umshado mhlambe ngezithathu ezithile nihlukane izingane zobiza isiphi isibongo. Okay, so for those who are not Zulu speaking, she wants an explanation in the event that she has a child. The father pays inhlawulo, time goes on, and then pays ilobolo. And then the only thing remaining is umshado, right? And then they part ways. What surname should the child have? So because inhlawulo was paid, ilobolo was paid. Children were so because that was paid, only thing that needs to be done for that child to take the father's surname, we just need to do imbuzi in terms of imbeleko for the child to actually be received by the father's surname. But amatongo of the father's surname, imbeleko needs to be done for those children. But yeah, it would be the father's surname because inhlawulo has been paid, ilobolo has been paid as well. And the fact that ilobolo has been paid, kushuku to the family accepted ilobolo. That is a formal and for the child. But the only way a woman can leave the family, change surnames, is umcaco. However, a child can change surnames with inhlawulo nelobolo, and then obviously imbuzi to bring them in. So I would say to you, Jabuliswe, hlabi imbuzi to bring the child into the family. Bafo, what if ubaba washona but did pay inhlawulo, not ilobolo? As a male child, how do I change my surname from my mother's side to my father's surname? Okay. So, if you are adamant on taking your father's surname, not a problem. You need to go to your relatives on your father's side of the surname, right? And you melo lobolo. And then your mother's side of the family needs to accept amalobola. Bahlabi imbuzo kukhipha, and then your father's side of the family bahlabi imbuzo kungenisa. Done. That's it. Pretty straightforward. Okay, I've answered the few ones. I just want to check out the new comments. I'm just going to take 2 more questions. We've actually run over time, and then we will call it a day. What if nakhishwa esibongweni somshado for particular reasons? What do you do? Hi, Xoli. I hope you're listening and watching this. And please, can you elaborate a bit more? If you don't feel comfortable because maybe those reasons are achulega kulu, you can always email someone. You can always email us at mlambomunye@umsamo.org.za and someone will answer you there. But I need a bit more I need a bit more information than that to answer your question. Okay, thanks, Snare. I just want to answer your question. So, Snare, your question will be the last one. So, your grandmother had your mom before she met her husband. Okay, so your grandmother had your mother before she met your grandfather. And your mom uses your grandmother's surname, Kuzwayo. Perfect. Perfect, that's fine. Your mom was raised by a stepfather, and your damages and rituals were done at your mom's stepdad's family. Okay, I understand now. Do you continue using your dad's surname? Okay, or use my grandmother's maiden surname? You should go back to your grandmother's maiden surname. Snare, I hope you listen to this. You need to go back to your grandmother's maiden surname. I'll tell you why. Your grandmother met your grandfather. I assume nothing was done because you don't say anything. So I assume nothing was done. I'm working on that assumption. Therefore, your Your grandmother, when you met your grandfather, had your mother. Your mother remains ukhuzwayo, right? Therefore, wena uyinganyana khuzwayo, even though your mother married a new gentleman, your stepdad, right? So the damages and the rituals being done at your stepdad's family are inappropriate. You need to go back and do them again. I think all you need to do is go back to your grandmother's maiden surname. That's what you need to do. You need to track back the problem and go back to that. But just I want you to tune in next week when I talk about problems that begin from the grandparents, if that makes sense. I'm going to talk about that next week. Okay, so since we've run out of time, guys, please can you tune into the next one, because I just said now I'm going to have to organize a special sessions one where we tuck into things like artificial insemination, IVF, all those things. So that's not going to be as long as this. That's going to probably be shorter, which means I'll have more time for questions. So please tune into that. Please write down your questions. And yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for tuning in. I will answer all questions. Please keep your questions. We'll answer them again at our special session. Have a lovely Monday evening or rest of the Monday evening. Look after yourself. Stay safe during this quarantine and lockdown period. Wherever you are in the world, let's keep washing our hands and maintain high private practice. Don't worry, no Kanye. I'll definitely touch on that. Thank you very much. Good night and have a lovely evening.